Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Swarna Ma'am's Biology. In this video, I will be explaining you about body fluids and circulation. Let us start. So coming to the body fluids and circulation, before let me tell us how the water pump is essential for transport of the water to the entire house. Even our heart also acts as a pumping machine which pumps the blood throughout our body. So heart is also like a pumping machine which pumps or transports the blood through all the cells and tissues present in our body. So coming to the body fluids and circulation. So the main objectives which I will be covering in the entire lesson are about the blood, components of the blood and different blood groups, coagulation of the blood, lymph, as well as human circulatory system, cardiac cycle, electrocardiograph, and a note on double circulation and some disorders of circulatory system. And in this video, I will be mainly covering about the blood and the components of the blood. So before going into that, let me tell what is meant by transport system. So what is the essentiality of this transport system? So this transport system are very much essential for the supply of nutrients, oxygen, as well as essential substances to all the cells, as well as removal of the waste materials from the cells. And what ha- so this is very much essential in the case of multicellular organisms, mainly in the case of human beings. But in the case of lower invertebrates like sponges as well as coelentrates, there will be circulation of water to the entire body, which helps in the facilitation of exchange of some substances. So when we see about the blood, blood, we know it is a fluid connective tissue, and when we see the blood, it contains 55% plasma and 45% about formed elements. So, the blood is a fluid connective tissue. It contains 55% plasma and 45% of the formed elements. So, let us see the different components which are present in the blood. So, first, studying about plasma. Plasma, when we see, it contains 90 to 92% of water and about 6 to 8% are plasma proteins. There are three plasma proteins which are present. They are albumin, globulin, as well as fibrinogen. So, what is plasma? So, when we centrifuge the blood, it will be differentiated into the yellow colored part or straw colored part, which we are calling it as plasma, and the blood cells will be accumulated down. So, this red colored part contains full of RBCs and WBCs. So, this is the fluid, this is the cellular components of the blood, whereas plasma is the straw colored part. So, the centrifugation of the blood results in the formation of the plasma as well as the blood cells. Here we can see the red color part is RBC, WBC, and on the top we will get the plasma, which is straw colored part. So when we say about the plasma proteins, there are three types of the plasma proteins. They are albumins, fibrinogen, as well as globulins. So let us see now each one. So coming to the albumins. So albumins are the main type of the plasma proteins which are present in our blood, and these albumins help in the osmotic balance. So these albumins help in the osmotic balance of the body, and these albumins, when they decrease, it results in what is called as edema. Means accumulation of the fluid in the tissues, we call it as edema. These are most important type of the plasma proteins of our body. So this is about albumins. So coming to the next type of the plasma proteins, which are fibrinogens. These fibrinogens help in the coagulation of the blood. So when there is an injury, so the blood will be coming out. So this blood which has came out has to be coagulated or it has to form a clot, which we call it as coagulation. This fibrinogen are the plasma proteins which are very much essential for clotting of the blood or coagulation of the blood. So the third type of the plasma proteins are globulins. When we see the globulins, there are three types of the globulins. They are alpha, beta, as well as gamma. So mainly the gamma globulins, which we call them as immunoglobulins. So, gamma globulins are called as immunoglobulins. They are mainly essential for the defense mechanism of our body. So, when we see the plasma proteins, again I am repeating, there are three types of the plasma proteins. They are albumins, fibrinogens, as well as globulins. So, albumins are the main type of the plasma proteins or abundant plasma proteins which are present in our blood, and they help in osmotic balance, and decrease in the albumins even results in edema. And coming to the fibrinogens, these fibrinogens are needed for the clotting of the blood. They are needed for the clotting as well as coagulation of the blood. And the third type of the plasma proteins are globulins. And these globulins are of three types. They are alpha, beta, and gamma. Mainly the gamma globulins, which are called as immunoglobulins, are mainly necessary for the defense mechanisms of our body. Means helping in the immunity. So coming to the plasma again. So we have seen plasma contains plasma proteins. Even the plasma also contains small amount of the minerals like sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and even bicarbonate ion, chloride ion, etc. And even it also contains some of the substances like glucose, amino acids, lipids, and these are all present in the plasma. So all these help in the mainly maintenance of osmotic balance of the blood. So they help in the osmotic balance of blood. So coming to the another word, that is serum. So how the serum is formed from the plasma? Again, when the plasma is centrifuged, when the plasma is centrifuged, so there occurs the top part, which is means we can say that the serum is the plasma without the clotting factors. We call it as means we know that blood minus blood cells is plasma. It is plasma, and this plasma minus clotting factors, we call it as serum. So in the blood, when the blood cells are removed, we are calling it as plasma. And in the plasma, when we remove that clotting factors, then we call it as serum. Okay. So serum is plasma minus clotting factors, or plasma without the clotting factors, we call it as serum. Okay. So now coming to the different cells which are present in the blood, what we call it as formed elements of the blood. So when we see the different cells present in our blood, there are RBCs, which we call them as red blood cells, and white blood cells, that is WBC, and platelets. So RBCs, which are also called as erythrocytes, and WBCs, which we call them as leukocytes, and platelets. So now let us discuss each and every type of the cells now. So first, we will be discussing about erythrocytes, that is RBC. When we see the RBC or erythrocytes, these are most abundant cells present in our blood, and there are about 5 to 5.5 millions of RBCs per cubic mm of the blood. It is in the case of the man, and in the case of the woman, it will be 4.5 millions per cubic mm of the blood. And mainly, the RBCs will be produced in the red bone marrow in the adults. So when we see the erythrocytes, that is RBC, in the case of embryonic stages, in the embryonic development, they will be formed from yolk sac in the embryonic stages. Later, even the formation of RBCs will be taken over by the liver as well as spleen. But after the birth, mainly the RBCs will be formed from red bone marrow. In the embryonic stages, Yolk sac will be responsible for the formation of the RBCs, whereas later even liver and spleen are also responsible for the formation of RBCs. But after birth, red bone marrow is mainly responsible for the formation of RBCs. And when we see what is the name given to the formation of RBCs, we call it as erythropoiesis. Formation of RBCs is called as erythropoiesis. And we have seen that the number of the RBCs is about 5 millions to 5.5 millions per cubic mm of the blood. And less number of RBCs is also dangerous, as well as more number of RBCs is also dangerous. So less number of RBCs, we call it as erythrocytopenia, which later leads to a disease which is called as anemia, means bloodlessness, and more number of RBCs. When the RBCs are more in number, we call it as polycythemia. We call it as polycythemia. Less number of RBCs, we are calling it as erythrocytopenia, which leads to anemia, and more number of RBCs, we call it as polycythemia. Okay. So this is about the number of RBCs. And when we see the structure of RBCs, usually it is biconcave in shape and there is no nucleus, so it is enucleate. So RBCs are enucleate, means no nucleus is present, and they are biconcave. Biconcave nature is very much essential for the attachment of a more number of hemoglobins. Okay, so biconcave in nature, and they are spherical in shape. They are spherical in shape in the case of man. Whereas there are some exceptions like camels and elma, where the RBCs are elliptical and nucleus is also present. So this is an exception. Normally in the case of man, it is enucleate and it is biconcave and it is spherical in shape. And it contains hemoglobin of about 12 to 16 grams. And biconcave nature is very much essential so that it helps in the attachment of hemoglobin. It is the main pigment which is giving the redness of the blood, and it is mainly essential for the attachment of the oxygen. So we have seen that RBCs are formed in the bone marrow, that is red bone marrow. And later, the lifespan of these RBCs is about only 120 days. Later, they have to be destroyed somewhere. So they are destroyed in spleen. So they are destroyed in spleen, and spleen is called as graveyard of RBCs. So spleen is called as graveyard of RBC. So spleen helps in the formation of RBCs in the embryonic development, whereas in the adult, it is acting as graveyard of RBC. So there may be a question saying that name the organ which helps in the formation of RBC as well as helps in the destruction of RBC. It is spleen. In the embryonic development, it helps in the formation of RBC, whereas in the adult, it helps in the destruction of RBCs. So we know that RBCs are formed in the bone marrow, that is red bone marrow, and they are destroyed in the spleen, and the lifespan of the RBC is about 120 days. When we see the lifespan of RBC, it is about 120 days. So now coming to the next type of the cells, that is leukocytes. Okay, leukocytes. So leukocytes are WBCs, that is white blood corpuscles, and the number of leukocytes is about 6,000 to 8,000 per meter cube of the blood, cubic mm of the blood. And when we see, leukocytes are bigger in size when compared to that of RBC, but lesser in number when compared to that of RBC. And they are colorless because they doesn't contain the pigment, that is hemoglobin. When we see the leukocytes, here the formation of the leukocytes occurs in the bone marrow, and the formation of the leukocytes we call it as leukopoiesis. Okay. And the number of the leukocytes is about 6,000 to 8,000 per cubic mm of the blood. And here also, more number of WBC, that is leukocytes, is also dangerous. Less number of WBCs is also dangerous. So, more number of WBC, we call it as leukemia, means very more number, so much number of RBCs. We call it as leukemia. It is a type of blood cancer, whereas less number of RBC or less number of WBC, we call it as leukocytopenia. Less number of WBC, we call it as leukocytopenia. So this is about WBC. Again, I am repeating. So these leukocytes are colorless because of the lack of hemoglobin. They are bigger in size when compared to that of RBC, but lesser in number when compared to that of RBC. And they are nucleated, whereas RBCs are enucleated. That doesn't contain nucleus. But WBCs, that is leukocytes, are nucleated. And the number of WBCs is about 6,000 to 8,000 per cubic mm of the blood. And the formation of the WBC, we call it as leukopoiesis, and more number of WBC, we call it as leukemia. Normally, there will be a slight increase in the number of WBC during some infections. It is not dangerous, means very a drastic increase in the number of WBC, we call it as leukemia. It is a type of blood cancer, and less number of WBC, we call it as leukocytopenia. And when we see the type of the WBCs, type of the blood cells, there are mainly two type of the WBCs. They are granulocytes as well as agranulocytes. Depending upon the granules which are present in the cytoplasm and the stains which they take, again the granulocytes are of three types. So they are neutrophils, eosinophils, as well as basophils. So agranulocytes, when there are no granules present in the cytoplasm, we call them as agranulocytes. There are two types of the agranulocytes. There are monocytes as well as lymphocytes. Again, when we see the lymphocytes, there are B lymphocytes as well as T lymphocytes. Now, we will be discussing each type of the WBC. That is, first we will be discussing about granulocytes. So, first I will be explaining about neutrophil. When you see the neutrophil, so these neutrophils doesn't take any strain. Actually, there will be, means we can say that they will take neutral strains. Means they doesn't form any color with the stains. They take the neutral stains. And when we see the nucleus of these neutrophils, it is many lobed, means more than three lobed. And these neutrophils are called as microscopic policemen of the blood. And we call them as mainly microscopic policemen of blood. Means they are mainly essential for fighting against infections. So coming to the eosinophils. So coming to the eosinophils, they take the stains like eosin. Okay. So they are red in color. And when we see the nucleus is bilobed. And when we see the number of eosinophils, they form about 2 to 3% of the total WBC. And these eosinophils are mainly produced more. There will be normally 2 to 3%. They will be produced in more number during the allergic reactions. When we are having some allergic reactions, when we see our blood cells, we will see more number of eosinophils, which indicate that we are having eosinophilia or allergy. So this is about eosinophils. So coming to the basophils, they form about 0.2 to 0.4% of the total WBC, and they take the basic dyes. So we call them as basophils. And when we see the lobes, they are also two lobed in number. Okay. So this is about neutrophil, eosinophil, and basophil. And this neutrophil forms about 67% of the total WBC. So these are about granulocytes. When we see agranulocytes, there are two types of the agranulocytes. So first is monocyte. Let us discuss about monocyte here. So when we see the monocyte, it is circular and it have a kidney shaped nucleus. When we see here, There is a kidney-shaped nucleus and it is round in shape. And this is also responsible for a process which is called as phagocytosis. Means phagocytosis means eating of bacteria. Eating of bacteria, we call it as phagocytosis. Means they eat away the bacteria or bacteria present in our body. So coming to the lymphocytes, so these lymphocytes are of two types, B lymphocytes as well as T lymphocytes. So both B lymphocytes as well as T lymphocytes are mainly responsible for several immunological reactions. They are responsible for immunological reactions like production of antibodies against the antigen or production of another cells which are again responsible for maintaining the defense mechanism of our body. So these are about different types of the blood cells. So again I will be repeating. When we see the blood cells, that is white blood cells, there are mainly two types of the white blood cells, granulocytes as well as agranulocytes. Depending upon the granules which are present in the cytoplasm, when we see the granulocytes, there are three types of the granulocytes. There is neutrophils, eosinophils, and basophils. When you see the neutrophils, they form about 67% of the total WBC. They stain with neutral stains, and their nucleus is many lobed, and they are called as microscopic policemen of blood. Discussing about eosinophils, they stain with the red dyes like eosin, and they are bilobed. They form about 2 to 3% of the total WBC present in our body, and they are more increase in number during the allergic reactions. So coming about basophils, they form about 0.2 to 0.4% of the WBC, and they stain with basic dyes, and the nucleus is two-lobed. And when we see about agranulocytes, there are two types of the agranulocytes, monocyte as well as lymphocyte. So when we see the monocyte, it is circular and it contains kidney-shaped nucleus and it helps in phagocytosis. Phagocytosis means eating away bacteria. We call it as phagocytosis. Or eating away the dead cells, we call it as phagocytosis. And when we see the lymphocytes, there are two types of the lymphocytes, B lymphocytes as well as T lymphocytes. Both are responsible for immunological reactions. So this is about different types of WBC present in our body. So here again, discussing about neutrophils. Neutrophils help in phagocytosis, means they will be helping in the eliminating of all the unwanted material from our body in the form of phagocytosis. They eat away the bacteria. So we call the term it as phagocytosis. And eosinophils, we have seen they are produced in more number during the allergic response, means they are mainly responsible for neutralizing antigen antibody reactions. So whenever more antigen enters into our body, antibodies will be produced to eliminate that antigen. In the case of allergic reactions, we know that our body responds more and produces more number of antibodies. So these eosinophils will be more in number. So they are mainly responsible for neutralizing these antigen antibody reactions. So coming to the basophils, we have seen basophils are the type of the granulocytes which stain with basic dyes, and they are mainly responsible for inflammatory reactions. Means whenever there is an injury, we will be seeing the swelling or redness present in that area. We call it as inflammation. So that swelling or redness, it is mainly because of the accumulation of these basophils. So monocytes are a type of agranulocytes and they help in phagocytosis. Phagocytosis means eating away bacteria. We call it as phagocytosis. So you can see that. So bacteria is eaten away by the cell. Okay. So this is about phagocytosis. And we have discussed two type of the lymphocytes are there. They are B lymphocytes as well as T lymphocytes. Both are responsible for immunological reactions by production of antibodies or production of monocytes or any other cells which are responsible for helping in the defense mechanism of our body. So let us take a small test. Which among the following is an agranulocyte? So neutrophil, basophil, eosinophil, lymphocyte. We have seen just now there are two types of the WBCs, granulocyte as well as agranulocyte, and we have seen there are three types of the granulocytes. They are neutrophils and basophils and eosinophils. These are granulocytes, whereas lymphocytes and monocytes are agranulocytes. These are granulocytes. So now we can answer. So which of the following is a granulocyte? Neutrophil is a granulocyte. Basophil is a granulocyte. Eosinophil is a granulocyte. So which is an agranulocyte? It is lymphocyte. So the correct answer is lymphocyte. Yes. Now coming to the next question. Lifespan of RBC is. So we have studied that the lifespan of RBC is 120 days. Later it will be destroyed in the spleen, and we have given the name of the spleen as graveyard of RBC. Even the spleen helps in the formation of RBC during the embryonic stages, but later it will be acting as graveyard of RBC. Okay. So let us proceed. So coming to the next type of the cells, which are called as platelets. So these platelets are produced from the cells which are called as megakaryocytes. So these megakaryocytes will form the cells which are called as platelets by the process which is called as fragmentation. By the process which is called as fragmentation. And there are about 115 lakh to 35 lakh platelets per cubic mm of the blood. And mainly the platelets are responsible for clotting of the blood or coagulation of the blood. Whenever there is an injury, the blood will be coming out, and this blood has to be coagulated or it has to be get clotted. And the main cells which are responsible for the clotting of the blood are platelets, which are formed from the cells which are called as megakaryocytes. So that's it for this video. So in this video, we have discussed mainly about the components of the blood. So in my next video, I will be explaining about the different types of the blood groups which are present in the human beings. So blood grouping as well as different blood groups which are present in humans. Okay, thank you. So if you like this video, please give a like, share and subscribe my channel Swarna Ma'am's Biology. Until then, bye.